The gunshot that ended Marcus Sullivan's brother still echoed in his mind 3 years later, though the actual sound had long faded into the Wyoming wind that swept across the valley near Sloan. Marcus stood at the window of his cabin, watching the dark clouds gather over the mountains to the west. The storm was coming fast, the kind that would turn the dirt roads into rivers of mud and keep sensible folks huddled inside for days. He did not mind. Storms meant he would not have to ride into town, would not have to endure the pitying looks from the shopkeeper or the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered the general store. 3 years of solitude had taught him that loneliness was easier to bear than sympathy. The cabin sat at the edge of the valley, far enough from Sloan that Marcus could go weeks without seeing another soul. He raised cattle, enough to keep himself fed and clothed, but not so many that he needed help during branding season. He had built the place with his own hands after returning from the war, back when his brother Thomas was still alive, back when he thought he might have a future that included more than just surviving one day after another. Thunder rumbled across the valley as Marcus turned from the window. The fire in the stone hearth needed tending, and he had beans soaking for supper. Simple food for a simple life. He was reaching for the poker when he heard something over the wind. Hoofbeats, fast and desperate. Marcus grabbed his rifle from above the door and stepped onto the porch. The rain had started, fat drops that hit the dry earth and sent up small clouds of dust. Through the gray curtain of the storm, he saw a horse galloping toward his cabin, its rider bent low over its neck. As they drew closer, Marcus realized two things. The rider was a woman, and someone was chasing her. 3 men on horseback emerged from the storm behind her, their shouts barely audible over the thunder. Marcus did not hesitate. He fired a warning shot into the air, the crack of the rifle sharp and clear. The 3 men reined in their horses, still a good 100 yards away. Marcus worked the lever action, chambering another round and fired again, this time close enough that the lead rider jerked his horse to the side. The woman reached the cabin and practically fell from her horse, stumbling up the porch steps. Marcus caught her arm with his free hand, steadying her. She was soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her face, her dress torn at the hem. Her eyes were wide with fear and something else he recognized, determination. "Please," she gasped. "They will kill me." Marcus pulled her inside and slammed the door, throwing the bolt. Through the window, he watched the 3 men. They had stopped at the edge of his property line, clearly weighing their options. Marcus showed them the rifle again, making sure they saw it clearly. After a long moment, the men turned their horses and disappeared back into the storm. "They will be back," the woman said behind him. She was shaking, whether from cold or fear he could not tell. Probably both. Marcus finally got a good look at her. She was younger than he had first thought, maybe 23 or 24, with sharp features and eyes the color of creek water after the spring thaw. Even soaked and frightened, there was something striking about her, something that made him look away quickly. "There is a blanket by the fire," he said, gesturing with the rifle before propping it back against the wall. "Get yourself warm. I will make coffee." She did not move immediately, studying him with those penetrating eyes. "You do not want to know why they were chasing me. Figured you would tell me when you were ready." Marcus moved to the stove, stoking the fire beneath the coffee pot. "Or not. Your business is your own." "My name is Beatrice Johnson," she said, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, "and I stole something." Marcus paused, then continued measuring coffee grounds. "What did you steal?" "Information." She moved closer to the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. "Those men work for a rancher named Pike. He has been stealing cattle from smaller ranchers, altering the brands and selling them as his own. I found the evidence, the records he kept in his office. I was a teacher at the school in town, but I also worked for him part-time, keeping his books. When I realized what he was doing, I took the ledger. That was foolish, Marcus said, though not unkindly. Perhaps. Beatrice's jaw set in a stubborn line. But someone had to do something. Pike has run 3 families out of the valley in the past year, good people who lost everything. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. Their fingers brushed briefly, and he pulled back as if burned. "And what did you plan to do with this ledger?" "Take it to the marshal in Cheyenne. We do not have law in Sloan that Pike does not control." She sipped the coffee, wincing at the heat. "I was trying to reach the train station when they caught up to me. The station is 20 miles east. You would not have made it in this storm. I had to try." Marcus studied her over the rim of his cup. There was something familiar in her eyes, that same desperate courage he had seen in soldiers during the war, the kind that came from having nothing left to lose. "Where is this ledger now?" Beatrice reached into her bodice and pulled out a small leather-bound book, its pages swollen with rain. "Right here." The storm intensified outside, the wind howling around the cabin like a living thing. Marcus moved to the windows, checking each one to make sure the shutters were secure. His mind was working through possibilities, none of them good. If Pike's men knew she had come here, they would wait out the storm and return. His cabin was defensible but not against a determined group of men. "You can stay until the storm passes," he said finally. "After that, we will figure out how to get you to Cheyenne." Beatrice set down her cup. "I cannot ask you to risk your life for this." "You did not ask, I am offering." Marcus met her eyes. "Pike is a bully and a thief. I have no love for men like him." Something shifted in Beatrice's expression, a softening around her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Marcus Sullivan." "Thank you, Marcus Sullivan." She smiled then, just a small curve of her lips, but it was the first genuine smile Marcus had seen directed at him in 3 years. It did something strange to his chest, made the cabin feel suddenly smaller and warmer. The storm raged through the night. Marcus gave Beatrice his bed in the small room off the main cabin and made himself a pallet near the fire. He did not sleep much, listening to the wind and the rain and the occasional creak of the cabin timbers. Twice he rose to check the windows, making sure no one was trying to approach under cover of darkness. Each time, he found himself glancing toward the closed door of the bedroom, wondering if Beatrice was sleeping or lying awake as he was. When dawn came, gray and sullen, the rain had lessened to a steady drizzle. Marcus was frying salt pork when Beatrice emerged, her hair hanging loose down her back. She had managed to dry her dress somewhat, though it was still wrinkled and stained with mud. "I should check on my horse," she said. "Already done. Fed and watered in the lean-to with mine." Marcus flipped the pork. "Breakfast will be ready soon." They ate in companionable silence, the kind that felt natural rather than awkward. Marcus found himself stealing glances at her, noting the way she held her fork, the small scar above her left eyebrow, the determined set of her shoulders even now. She caught him looking once and raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "Tell me about these families Pike ran off," Marcus said, pushing his empty plate away. Beatrice set down her fork. "The Hendersons were first. They had a small spread north of town, maybe 100 head of cattle. Pike made them an offer to buy, and when they refused, their cattle started disappearing. Then their barn burned. After that, they packed up and left. The Martinez family was next, then the Weavers. Same pattern each time. And the law did nothing. Sheriff Campbell is in Pike's pocket. Has been for years." Beatrice's hands clenched into fists on the table. "Everyone knows it, but no one has proof. That is why the ledger is so important. It has everything in his own hand, dates and numbers and brands." He kept track of every animal he stole, like it was just another business transaction. Marcus stood and walked to the window. The valley stretched out before him, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. He thought of Thomas, of the senseless violence that had taken his brother over a card game dispute. Pike was cut from the same cloth as the man who had killed Thomas, men who took what they wanted and crushed anyone who stood in their way. "I will take you to Cheyenne," he said. "You do not have to do this." Marcus turned to face her. "Yes, I do." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Beatrice nodded once and Marcus began planning their route. They spent the day preparing. Marcus cleaned and loaded both his rifle and his Colt revolver, while Beatrice checked the ledger, spreading the damp pages carefully to dry. She had a small pistol of her own, Marcus discovered, a pocket revolver that looked almost like a toy in her capable hands. "My father taught me to shoot," she said when she caught him watching. "He believed women should know how to protect themselves." Smart man. "He died 2 years ago, cholera outbreak. I am sorry." Beatrice shrugged, but Marcus saw the pain in her eyes. "It is just me now. No family left to speak of." "I understand that," Marcus said quietly. When she looked at him questioningly, he added, "My brother died 3 years ago, shot by a drunk in a saloon over nothing. Our parents were already gone by then, casualties of influenza, been on my own since." "Is that why you live all the way out here?" Marcus considered lying, then decided against it. There was something about Beatrice that invited honesty. "Partly. Mostly I just got tired of people. After the war, after Thomas died, it seemed easier to be alone." "Was it? Easier, I mean." He met her eyes. "Until yesterday, I would have said yes." A flush crept up Beatrice's neck, and she turned back to the ledger. Marcus felt heat in his own face and retreated to check on the horses, cursing himself for speaking so plainly. But it was true. Something had shifted in him the moment she stumbled through his door. Some part of him he thought had died with Thomas stirring back to life. By evening, the storm had passed completely, leaving the world washed clean and the sky streaked with orange and gold. Marcus stood on the porch watching the sunset when Beatrice joined him. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "Lonely but beautiful. That is why I chose it. Do you ever regret it? The isolation," Marcus thought about that. "Sometimes. Mostly when I remember what it was like to have someone to talk to at the end of the day, to share a meal with, to hear another voice besides my own. I know that feeling." Beatrice wrapped her arms around herself, though the evening was warm. "After my father died, I threw myself into teaching. The children helped, gave me purpose. But at night in the boarding house, I would lie awake and feel the emptiness. It is a particular kind of loneliness, is it not? The kind that comes from having loved and lost." "Yes." Marcus surprised himself by reaching out and gently taking her hand. She did not pull away, "But perhaps we are both due for something better." She squeezed his fingers. "Perhaps we are." They stood like that until the last light faded from the sky, connected by the simple touch of hands. Two lonely people who had found unexpected companionship in the midst of danger. When they finally went inside, Marcus felt lighter than he had in years, as if some burden he had been carrying had lessened just slightly. That night, they sat by the fire and talked. Really talked, in a way Marcus had not done since Thomas died. Beatrice told him about her childhood in Ohio, about traveling west with her father after her mother died, about the joy she found in teaching children to read and write. Marcus spoke of the war, carefully at first and then with more openness as he realized she was not judging him. He told her about Thomas, about the guilt he carried for not being there the night his brother died, about the cabin he had built as much to hide from the world as to make a home. "You cannot blame yourself," Beatrice said. "You could not have known." Logically, I know that. But logic does not always reach the heart. No, it does not. She was quiet for a moment. I blamed myself when my father died. I was teaching that day instead of caring for him. By the time I got home, he was unconscious. He died without me getting to say goodbye. For months, I tortured myself with what-ifs. What if I had stayed home? What if I had checked on him at lunch? It nearly drove me mad. What changed? Nothing, really. The guilt is still there, but I learned to live with it, to accept that some things are beyond our control. Life happens whether we are ready or not. She looked at him across the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames. Sometimes I think the best we can do is keep moving forward and try to do some good with the time we have. Is that why you took the ledger? To do some good? Partly. Also because I was angry. A fierce light came into her eyes. Pike came into the school one day, acting like he owned the place, which technically he did since he is on the school board. He looked at those children, those beautiful, hopeful children, and I saw nothing but calculation in his eyes. How he could use them, use their families. It made me sick. So when I found the evidence, I took it. Maybe it was foolish, but I could not stand by and do nothing. Marcus found himself smiling. I think it was brave, foolish maybe, but brave too. You are the brave one. You could have sent me away, but you opened your door to a stranger. You knocked, Marcus said simply. How could I do anything else? The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. Marcus wanted to cross the space separating them, to pull her into his arms, but he held back. It was too soon, too fast. They had known each other less than a day, but the pull was there, undeniable and strong. Beatrice stood abruptly. I should sleep. We have a long ride ahead of us tomorrow. Yes. Good night, Beatrice. Good night, Marcus. She paused at the door to the bedroom, looking back at him. Thank you for everything. You are welcome. After she closed the door, Marcus sat by the fire for another hour, thinking about the strange turns life could take. Yesterday he had been alone, content in his isolation, convinced he would live out his days with only the cattle and the wind for company. Today, everything felt different, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. He thought about Beatrice's smile, her courage, the way she looked at him as if she saw past the walls he had built around himself. When he finally lay down on his pallet, sleep came easier than it had in months. His last thought before drifting off was of green eyes and a smile that made the cabin feel like a home. They rose before dawn, eating a quick breakfast of biscuits and coffee. Marcus saddled both horses while Beatrice secured the ledger in a leather saddlebag. The morning was cool and crisp, the storm having cleared the oppressive heat that had hung over the valley for weeks. We will take the northern route, Marcus said, checking his rifle one last time. It is longer, but it keeps us away from Pike's main ranch and the roads his men are likely to watch. How long will it take? 2 days if we push hard. 3 if we need to be careful. He swung into his saddle. I am betting on careful. They rode out as the sun crested the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Marcus led them north, following game trails and creek beds rather than established roads. It was rougher going, but it kept them hidden in the low areas between hills. By noon, they had covered perhaps 10 miles, not as much as Marcus would have liked, but good progress considering the terrain. They stopped to water the horses at a small stream. Beatrice dismounted stiffly, and Marcus realized she was not as accustomed to long hours in the saddle as he was. How are you holding up? He asked. Fine, she said, but he could see the strain around her eyes. We can rest here for a bit. Let the horses graze. I do not want to slow us down. You are not. Even horses need rest. Marcus unsaddled his mount and used the saddle blanket to make a seat for Beatrice. Sit. Take your boots off if they are rubbing. She did, wincing as she pulled off the worn leather. "I am not used to riding all day. Most days I walk to the school and back, maybe a mile each way." Marcus knelt and examined her feet. "You are getting blisters. Wait here." He rummaged in his saddlebag and produced a small tin of salve. "Here, this will help." Beatrice looked at the tin, then at him. "You carry blister salve." "I learned the hard way that it is better to treat them before they get bad." He handed her the tin and turned away to give her privacy. "Take your time." While she tended her feet, Marcus scouted the area, more to give her space than from any real concern about pursuit. The landscape was quiet, just the murmur of the stream and the occasional call of a bird. He thought about the years he had spent crossing this country, first during the war and then after, always moving, never settling until he built the cabin. He had walked these hills and valleys in solitude, content to be alone with his thoughts and memories. But now, knowing Beatrice was just a few yards away, the solitude felt hollow, incomplete. When he returned, she had her boots back on and was braiding her hair. "Thank you for the salve. It helped. Good. We should move on soon. I want to reach the canyon before dark." "What canyon?" "There is a narrow pass about 5 miles north. It cuts through the ridge and saves us from having to go around, but we need to reach it before nightfall or risk the horses in the dark." They rode on, climbing steadily into higher country. The terrain became rockier, the vegetation sparser. Marcus kept watching their back trail but saw no sign of pursuit. Either Pike's men had given up or they were biding their time. He suspected the latter. The sun was low when they reached the canyon. It was just as Marcus remembered, a narrow cleft in the rock, barely wide enough for 2 horses to pass side by side. The walls rose 50 feet on either side, blocking out most of the remaining light. "Stay close," Marcus said. "The footing can be tricky." They entered the canyon single file, their horses' hooves echoing off the stone walls. It was cooler here, almost cold, and Marcus could feel Beatrice shivering behind him. He pushed on, wanting to clear the canyon before full dark. They were halfway through when Marcus heard it, the click of a hammer being drawn back. "That is far enough, Sullivan." Marcus reined in his horse. Ahead, blocking the exit of the canyon, sat 3 men on horseback, Pike's men, the same ones who had chased Beatrice to his cabin. In the fading light, Marcus could see they all had weapons drawn. "Give us the woman and the book and you can ride away," the leader said. He was a big man with a scar across his jaw. "Otherwise, you both die here." Marcus felt Beatrice press close behind him. His mind raced through options. They could not go back. The canyon was too narrow to turn the horses easily. Going forward meant riding into certain gunfire. They were trapped. "Think carefully," the scarred man continued. "Pike does not care about you, Sullivan. This is not your fight. Give us the woman and you can go back to your lonely little cabin and your lonely little life." "No," Marcus said simply. "What?" I said no. Marcus kept his voice calm, though his heart was hammering. "You want her, you go through me." The scarred man laughed. 1 against 3. "Those are bad odds, friend." "Maybe. But let me tell you what I learned during the war." Marcus shifted slightly in his saddle, his hand drifting toward his Colt. "In a narrow space like this, numbers do not matter as much as you think. Bullets ricochet off rock. And in the time it takes you to fire, I can get at least 2 of you. Maybe all 3 if I am lucky. The question is, which 2 want to die today?" The 3 men exchanged glances. Marcus could see the calculation in their eyes, the weighing of odds. He had not been bluffing. In the narrow confines of the canyon, a firefight would be messy and deadly for everyone involved. "Pike is not paying us enough to die," one of the other men muttered. "Shut up," the scarred man snapped. "He is right though, Cade," the third man said. "We signed on to chase down a woman, not fight a war veteran in a shooting gallery." Cade's jaw worked. his scar pulling white against his weathered skin. "Pike will not be happy." "Pike can go to hell," the second man said, holstering his weapon. "I am done." He turned his horse and disappeared into the gathering darkness. After a moment, the third man followed. Cade remained, his gun still trained on Marcus. "This is not over," he said. "Probably not," Marcus agreed. "But it is over for today." Cade spat into the dust and finally lowered his weapon. "You made a powerful enemy, Sullivan, and for what? A woman you just met. That book will not save anyone. Pike owns this valley. Maybe, or maybe his time is ending. You are a fool." Cade wheeled his horse around. "You both are." When the sound of his horse faded, Beatrice released a breath Marcus had not realized she had been holding. "That was incredibly dangerous," she said. "Yes, you could have been killed." "Yes." "Why did you do it?" Marcus turned in his saddle to look at her. "Because some things are worth the risk." They held each other's gaze for a long moment. Then Beatrice leaned forward and kissed him, quick and fierce. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "We should keep moving," Marcus said, his voice rough. "Yes, we should." They rode out of the canyon into the deepening night. Marcus found a sheltered spot beneath an overhang where they could camp without a fire. It was not ideal, but after the confrontation in the canyon, he did not want to advertise their position. They ate cold biscuits and dried beef, sharing water from Marcus's canteen. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "Tell me about your cabin," Beatrice said suddenly. "What made you choose that spot?" Marcus leaned back against his saddle. "The valley, mostly. I wanted somewhere remote but with good water and grazing. The spot I chose has a spring that runs year-round, and the cabin sits high enough that I can see anyone coming from miles away." "Sounds lonely." "It was, it is," he paused. "But it was what I thought I wanted. What I needed. And now I am not so sure." Marcus looked at her, this woman who had crashed into his life barely 2 days ago and turned everything upside down. "You asked me earlier if I regretted the isolation. I do. I have for a while, but I was too stubborn or too scared to admit it. I convinced myself that being alone was noble somehow, that I was honoring Thomas's memory by shutting myself away. But Thomas would have hated that. He always said life was meant to be lived, not just survived." Beatrice reached across the small space between them and took his hand. "Your brother sounds like he was a good man." "He was. Better than me in a lot of ways. He could make friends with anyone, could find joy in the smallest things. I was always the serious one, the one who worried about the future. Thomas lived in the moment." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I think that is why his death hit me so hard. It felt like all the light went out of the world." "I understand that. When my father died, I felt the same way. He was my anchor, the one constant in my life. Without him, I felt adrift." She moved closer until their shoulders were touching. "But we have to keep going, do we not? Find new anchors, new sources of light." "Is that what you are doing?" "With the ledger, with standing up to Pike? I suppose so. I am tired of feeling powerless, of watching bad men do bad things while good people suffer. If I can stop Pike, even just this once, maybe it means something. Maybe it proves that we do not have to accept the way things are." Marcus put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. They sat like that for a long time, drawing comfort from each other's presence. When Beatrice finally dozed off, Marcus continued holding her, unwilling to let go, unwilling to return to the isolation he now recognized as a kind of slow death. He woke her just before dawn. They ate quickly and were back in the saddle as the first light touched the eastern horizon. The landscape had changed overnight. They were in higher country now, with more trees and better cover. Marcus felt marginally safer, though he knew they were not out of danger yet. "How much farther to Cheyenne?" Beatrice asked as they rode. "If we keep this pace, we should reach it by tomorrow evening. There is a way station about 10 miles ahead where we can rest properly, maybe get a hot meal." "That sounds wonderful. I think I have forgotten what hot food tastes like." Marcus smiled. "I will buy you the biggest steak they have." "My hero," she said, but her tone was warm, not mocking. They reached the way station by midday. It was a rough structure, more barn than building, but it had a stable for the horses and a fire going inside. The proprietor, an ancient man named Hoskins, took their money without comment and served them beef stew and bread. "You folks look like you have been riding hard," Hoskins observed, refilling their coffee cups. "Just eager to get to Cheyenne," Marcus said carefully. Hoskins squinted at them. "Got business there, family," Beatrice interjected smoothly. "We are visiting family." "Uh-huh." Hoskins did not look convinced, but he did not press. "Well, you picked a good time to stop. Storm coming in tonight." "Not as bad as the one 2 days back, but enough to slow you down if you get caught in it." Marcus and Beatrice exchanged glances. Another delay could be dangerous, but so was riding exhausted horses through a storm. "We will stay the night," Marcus decided. "Head out at first light." Hoskins nodded and shuffled off to tend to other travelers. The way station had several other occupants: a family heading west, a pair of miners returning from failed claims, and a traveling preacher. Marcus kept watch on all of them, but none seemed to pay him or Beatrice any special attention. That evening, Hoskins provided 2 small rooms for them, little more than closets with bedrolls, but private and secure. Before retiring, Marcus walked the perimeter of the station, checking sight lines and exit routes. Old habits from the war, but habits that had kept him alive. He found Beatrice standing outside watching the sunset. The approaching storm clouds made it spectacular, all crimson and gold and deep purple. "Beautiful," she murmured. "Yes," Marcus agreed, but he was looking at her, not the sky. She caught his gaze and smiled. "We are going to make it, are we not? To Cheyenne?" "Yes. I promise you, Beatrice, I will get you there safely. I believe you." She turned to face him fully. "Can I ask you something? Anything? What happens after we deliver the ledger and Pike is dealt with?" Marcus had been thinking about that question himself. "What do you want to happen?" "I do not know." Beatrice looked down at her hands. "I have no job to return to. Pike will have made sure of that. No place to live. I suppose I could find a teaching position somewhere else, start over again." "Or," Marcus prompted gently, "or I could see where this thing between us leads." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Because there is something here, is there not? I am not imagining it." "No." Marcus took her hands in his. "You are not imagining it. I have known you 3 days. This is insane." "Probably. But I cannot stop thinking about you, about what it would be like to not say goodbye when this is over." Marcus pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "Then do not. Say goodbye, I mean. Come back to the valley with me. The cabin is isolated, yes, but it does not have to be lonely. We could build something together, something real." "You mean that?" "I have never meant anything more in my life." Beatrice kissed him then, not the quick, fierce kiss from the canyon, but something deeper, slower, full of promise. Marcus wrapped his arms around her and held on, feeling pieces of himself that had been frozen for years finally begin to thaw. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I should go to my room," Beatrice said, but made no move to leave. "You should," Marcus agreed, but did not release her. "People are watching. Let them." She laughed, the sound bright and free. "Marcus Sullivan, are you trying to ruin my reputation? I think you ruined that yourself when you stole Pike's ledger." "Fair point." She kissed him again, quick and light. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Beatrice." He watched her disappear into the way station, then stood under the darkening sky for a long time, marveling at how completely his life had changed in just a few days. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for 3 years had simply evaporated, replaced by something bright and terrifying and wonderful. He thought about Thomas, about what his brother would say if he could see Marcus now. Thomas would be laughing, probably, telling Marcus it was about damn time he let someone in. "I think I am falling in love, brother," Marcus whispered to the night sky. "Strange as that sounds, 3 days and I am falling in love." The wind rose, carrying the smell of rain. Marcus took it as an answer, as Thomas's blessing. He went inside feeling lighter than he had in years. The storm arrived in the night, but it was gentler than predicted, more rain than wind. Marcus dozed fitfully, listening to the water drumming on the roof, his mind running through the last leg of their journey. Tomorrow they would reach Cheyenne. They would deliver the ledger to the marshal, and Pike would face justice. And then Marcus would bring Beatrice home, to the cabin in the valley, and they would begin the process of building a life together. It seemed impossible that so much could change so quickly. 4 days ago, he had been alone, resigned to his solitude. Now he was planning a future that included someone else, someone who had seen past his walls and decided he was worth fighting for. The thought terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. Morning came gray and damp. They ate breakfast with the other travelers, then saddled their horses. The rain had stopped, but the ground was soft, which would slow them down. "Stay alert," Marcus told Beatrice as they rode out. "We are close now. If Pike's men are going to make another attempt, it will be today." The morning passed without incident. They made good time despite the mud, and by noon Marcus began to relax slightly. Perhaps Cade and his companions had truly given up. Perhaps they would reach Cheyenne without further trouble. He should have known better. They were crossing an open meadow, less than 5 miles from Cheyenne, when riders appeared on both sides. 6 men this time, well armed and determined. Marcus recognized Cade among them. "End of the line, Sullivan," Cade called out. "No more chances. Give us the ledger or die." Marcus's hand went to his Colt, but he knew the odds this time were impossible. 6-2 in open ground with no cover. He looked at Beatrice and saw the same calculation in her eyes. "What do we do?" she whispered. Before Marcus could answer, a new voice rang out across the meadow. "I suggest you boys drop your weapons." Marcus turned to see a group of riders emerging from the tree line behind them. 8 men, all wearing badges. At their head was a tall man with silver hair and a marshal's star pinned to his vest. "Marshal Cordell," Cade said, his face going pale. "This is not your concern. When I see 6 armed men threatening 2 travelers in broad daylight, it becomes my concern." Cordell's voice was calm but hard as iron. "Now drop those guns before I arrest all of you for attempted robbery." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, Cade's men lowered their weapons. They were outlaws, but they were not stupid enough to face down 8 federal marshals. "Smart choice," Cordell said. He rode forward, his deputies flanking him. "Now get out of here before I change my mind and haul you all to jail." Cade and his men rode off, but not before Cade threw one last venomous look at Marcus and Beatrice. When they were gone, Cordell turned his attention to the pair. "Marshal Cordell," Marcus said, relief flooding through him. "Your timing is impeccable." "Marcus Sullivan." Cordell's weathered face creased into a smile. "Been a long time. Army, was it not? Shiloh." "Yes, sir, I remember you. You were a major then." "That was another lifetime." Cordell looked at Beatrice. "And who might this be?" "Beatrice Johnson," she said, finding her voice. "Marshal, I have evidence of criminal activity that I need to present to the authorities in Cheyenne." Cordell raised an eyebrow. "What kind of evidence?" Beatrice pulled out the ledger and handed it to him, As he flipped through the pages, his expression grew darker. "Pike," he muttered. "Of course it is Pike. I have been trying to catch that snake for years, but could never get enough evidence." "It is all there," Beatrice said. "Every theft, every altered brand, every crime he has committed in the past 3 years." Cordell closed the ledger and looked at her with new respect. "Where did you get this?" "I worked for him. When I realized what he was doing, I took it. Brave, foolish, but brave." Cordell handed the ledger back to her. "Come on, let us get you both to Cheyenne properly. I want this in the official record before Pike has a chance to wriggle out of it." They rode the last few miles surrounded by marshals. Marcus felt the tension finally leave his shoulders as the buildings of Cheyenne came into view. They had made it. Against all odds, they had actually made it. The marshal's office was a solid brick building in the center of town. Cordell ushered them inside and spent the next 2 hours going through the ledger page by page, taking notes and asking questions. Beatrice answered everything clearly and confidently, never wavering even when Cordell pressed her on details. "This is good," Cordell said finally. "Very good. With this evidence, I can get a warrant for Pike's arrest today. He will not see the inside of his ranch again except as a prisoner." "What about the families he ruined?" Beatrice asked. "The Hendersons, the Martinez family, the Weavers. They will be notified. If they want to press charges, we will add those to the list. Pike will spend the rest of his life in prison, Miss Johnson. I can promise you that." Beatrice sagged in her chair, the exhaustion of the past few days finally catching up with her. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder and she covered it with her own. "Thank you, Marshal," Marcus said. "Thank Miss Johnson. She is the brave one." Cordell stood. "You two look like you could use a good meal and a real bed. The hotel across the street is clean and reasonable. Get some rest." "You have earned it." They took his advice. Marcus paid for 2 rooms at the hotel, though as he handed over the money, he wondered if they would actually use both. The thought made his pulse quicken. But when they reached the landing, Beatrice squeezed his hand and said, "I need to sleep, truly sleep, for about 12 hours. Can we talk tomorrow, of course?" Marcus fought down his disappointment. She was right. They were both exhausted. "Tomorrow." She kissed him softly. "Tomorrow. I promise." Marcus watched her disappear into her room, then entered his own. The bed was soft, a luxury after days on the ground, and despite his racing thoughts, he was asleep within minutes. He woke to knocking on his door. The sun was high. He had slept most of the day away. He opened the door to find Beatrice standing there, clean and wearing a new dress. She looked radiant. "I went shopping," she said, twirling to show off the blue fabric. "Figured I deserved something that was not torn and muddy. You look beautiful." Marcus was suddenly aware that he was unshaven and rumpled. "Give me a few minutes to clean up. Take your time. I will wait downstairs." Marcus washed and shaved and changed into his cleanest shirt. When he came down to the lobby, Beatrice was waiting by the window, looking out at the street. She turned when she heard him and smiled. "Better, much." He offered his arm. "Dinner, please." They found a restaurant that served excellent steaks, just as Marcus had promised. Over the meal, they talked about everything and nothing. Cheyenne, the marshal, what would happen to Pike. But underneath the casual conversation was a current of tension, of anticipation for the discussion they both knew was coming. Finally, as they were finishing their coffee, Beatrice said, "So, your invitation to come back to the valley with you, does it still stand?" Marcus set down his cup carefully. "Yes, absolutely yes. Even though we have only known each other for 4 days. I know it is fast. I know it is probably crazy, but I also know that I have not felt this alive, this hopeful in 3 years, not since Thomas died." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Beatrice. I am just asking you to give us a chance. Come back with me." We will take things slow, see where this goes. If it does not work out, I will take you anywhere you want to go. But I think we owe it to ourselves to find out. Beatrice was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Finally, she said, I sold everything when I left Sloan. I have no ties there, nothing to go back to. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. I am not a meek woman. I will not be content just keeping house and having babies. I need purpose, something to work toward. I would never ask you to be anything other than who you are, Marcus said. The cabin has land, Beatrice. Good land. We could build it into a real ranch, something substantial. Or you could teach. There are enough scattered families in the valley that a school would be welcome. We can figure it out together. Together, Beatrice repeated, testing the word. I like the sound of that. So you will come with me? Yes, she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Yes, Marcus Sullivan, I will come back to the valley with you. Marcus stood and pulled her up with him, kissing her right there in the restaurant, not caring who saw. When they broke apart, several of the other diners were staring, but Beatrice just laughed. Scandalous, she said. Get used to it, Marcus replied. They spent another day in Cheyenne, partly to rest but mostly because Marshal Cordell asked them to stay in case he needed additional testimony. On the second evening, he found them at the hotel. It is done, he said, satisfaction clear in his voice. Pike was arrested this morning. He tried to fight, but we had enough men that it was over quick. He is in a cell right now, and he will stay there until his trial. What about his men? Beatrice asked. The ones who chased us. Most scattered when they heard Pike was arrested. We caught a few, including your friend Cade. They will stand trial too. Cordell pulled up a chair. I also sent word to the families Pike ruined. The Hendersons are already talking about returning. With Pike gone, the valley will be a different place. That is good news, Marcus said. It is. And it is all because of you too. Cordell looked at them seriously. What you did was dangerous and brave. The territory owes you a debt. We just did what was right, Beatrice said. Not everyone does. That is what makes it special. Cordell stood. You are free to go whenever you want. If you need anything at all, you let me know. After he left, Marcus and Beatrice sat in comfortable silence. Finally, Marcus said, we could leave tomorrow, head back to the valley. I would like that. Beatrice leaned against him. I am ready to see this cabin of yours, this place you call home. Our home, Marcus corrected. If you want it to be. I do. They left Cheyenne at dawn, their horses fresh and their spirits high. The journey back was leisurely compared to the desperate rush out. They took their time, camping under the stars, talking and laughing and slowly learning each other. Marcus found himself sharing things he had never told anyone, and Beatrice did the same. The connection between them deepened with each passing day. When they finally crested the ridge overlooking the valley, Marcus reined in his horse. Below, he could see his cabin, small and solid against the vast landscape. There it is, he said. Home. Beatrice studied the scene carefully. It is perfect, she said finally. Remote, yes, but beautiful. I can see why you chose it. Wait until you see the inside. It is rough but solid. We can add on, make it bigger, maybe build a real barn, expand the herd. Maybe a garden, Beatrice added, and a chicken coop. I have always wanted chickens. Marcus laughed. Chickens it is. They rode down into the valley as the sun set, painting everything in gold. When they reached the cabin, Marcus dismounted and helped Beatrice down. She turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. The cabin, the lean-to, the stream that ran nearby, the endless sky above. It feels right, she said. Being here with you, it feels right. Marcus pulled her close. I love you, Beatrice Johnson. I know it is soon, but I do. I love you. I love you too, she said, her eyes shining. I think I have since you stood on your porch with that rifle and decided a stranger was worth protecting. They kissed as the last light faded from the sky. Two lonely people who had found each other in the midst of a storm and decided to build something beautiful together. The days that followed were busy. Marcus showed Beatrice everything about the ranch, from where he grazed the cattle to the best fishing spot on the stream. Together they planned improvements. An addition to the cabin, a proper barn, fencing for the garden Beatrice wanted. They rode to Sloan to buy supplies, finding a town transformed by Pike's arrest. People who had been afraid were now hopeful, talking about rebuilding, about making the valley into a real community. Marcus introduced Beatrice to the shopkeeper, Mrs. Chen, who immediately took her under her wing. About time Marcus found himself a woman, Mrs. Chen said, ignoring Marcus's embarrassment. He has been moping around here like a ghost for years. I was not moping, Marcus protested. You absolutely were moping, Mrs. Chen said. She turned to Beatrice. You are good for him, I can tell. Word spread quickly that Marcus Sullivan had returned with a woman. Over the next few weeks, families began stopping by the cabin, ostensibly to welcome Beatrice, but really to satisfy their curiosity. Beatrice charmed them all, and soon she had a small army of women offering advice on everything from gardening to the best way to cook venison. One visitor was Martha Henderson, whose family had been run off by Pike. We are coming back, she told them over coffee. Thanks to you, we can come home. Our land is still there and we are going to rebuild. Tom is already making plans. That is wonderful news, Beatrice said warmly. It is all because of you. What you did, standing up to Pike, it gave everyone else courage. Martha looked at Beatrice seriously. We are also talking about starting a school. We have enough children in the valley now to warrant it. Would you be interested in teaching? Beatrice's face lit up. I would love that, more than anything. After Martha left, Beatrice threw her arms around Marcus. A school, I can teach again. Marcus held her, feeling her joy as if it were his own. This was what he wanted for her: purpose, community, happiness. The valley was coming alive again, and they were part of it. As summer turned to fall, the cabin took shape around them. They added a second room, giving them a real bedroom separate from the main living space. They built a chicken coop, and Beatrice acquired a flock of hens that she doted on like children. The garden flourished under her care, providing vegetables that made their simple meals feel like feasts. The school opened in October, in a newly built structure near the center of the valley. Beatrice had 15 students, ranging in age from 6 to 14. She threw herself into teaching with infectious enthusiasm, and the children adored her. Marcus would ride by sometimes and watch through the window as she worked with them, her face glowing with purpose and joy. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fire after supper, Beatrice said, I have been thinking. About. Marcus looked up from the harness he was mending. About us, about making this permanent. Marcus set down the harness, giving her his full attention. Permanent how? I think you know how. Beatrice's cheeks flushed pink. I am not asking you to propose, Marcus Sullivan. I am proposing to you. Will you marry me? Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then started laughing. You realize that is supposed to be my job. I was tired of waiting for you to get around to it. I was waiting for the right moment, and I decided to make my own moment. Beatrice's chin came up in that stubborn way he loved. So, will you marry me or not? Marcus crossed the space between them and pulled her to her feet. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He kissed her thoroughly, then pulled back with a grin. Though I had a whole plan, you know, I was going to propose at Christmas. You can still propose at Christmas if you want. I will say yes again. Deal. They were married in November in the church in Sloan with half the valley in attendance. Marshal Cordell came all the way from Cheyenne to give Beatrice away, and Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. Marcus wore his best suit. and Beatrice wore a dress the color of cream, with wildflowers in her hair. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed his bride and felt the last pieces of his broken heart finally mend. This was what Thomas would have wanted for him. Love, community, a future bright with possibility. The reception was held in the saloon, which had been cleaned and decorated for the occasion. There was music and dancing and food enough to feed an army. Marcus danced with his wife, holding her close, amazed that this was his life now. The lonely man who had shut himself away was gone, replaced by someone who was part of something larger. A family, a community, a future. As winter approached, they settled into married life. Marcus found that having someone to share his days with made even mundane tasks feel meaningful. Chopping wood was more enjoyable when Beatrice brought him coffee and stayed to talk. Mending fences was less tedious when she rode along to help. And the nights were full of warmth and laughter and love that made the cold outside seem like a distant concern. In January, Beatrice announced she was pregnant. Marcus received the news with a mixture of joy and terror. He was going to be a father. The thought overwhelmed him until Beatrice took his hand and said, "We will figure it out together. That is what we do." Together, Marcus agreed and felt the fear recede. Spring brought new life to the valley in more ways than one. The cattle thrived, the garden burst into bloom, and Beatrice's belly grew round. Marcus found himself building a cradle in the evenings, his hands shaping wood into something beautiful and functional. He thought often of Thomas, wishing his brother could meet the child that would soon arrive. But in his quieter moments, Marcus felt Thomas's presence, a gentle approval that warmed him like sunshine. The baby came in September, a boy with strong lungs and his mother's green eyes. They named him Thomas, after the brother Marcus had lost. When Marcus held his son for the first time, he wept, not from sadness but from overwhelming gratitude. This was a gift he had not expected, a second chance at family and love. Beatrice recovered quickly from the birth, and by October she was talking about returning to teaching. "Not full-time," she said, bouncing Thomas on her hip, "but I miss the students, and Martha said she would watch Thomas during the mornings." "Whatever makes you happy," Marcus said, and meant it. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch prospered, growing into one of the larger operations in the valley. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, asking endless questions about cattle and horses and the land. When he was 3, a daughter arrived, a girl with dark hair and her father's serious eyes. They named her Sarah after Beatrice's mother. The school expanded, requiring a second room and another teacher. Beatrice taught mornings and spent afternoons with her children, and Marcus thought he had never seen her happier. The valley itself continued to thrive, more families arriving to take advantage of the good land now that Pike's shadow had been lifted. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, Marcus and Beatrice would sit on the porch and watch the sunset over the mountains. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, but always Marcus felt a deep contentment that he had once thought impossible. "Do you remember the night I knocked on your door?" Beatrice asked one such evening. Thomas was 4, Sarah was 1, and Beatrice was pregnant again. "Every detail," Marcus said. "You were soaked through and scared but trying not to show it. I was terrified. I thought Pike's men would kill me, or worse." She leaned against his shoulder. "I never imagined that running to a stranger's cabin would change my entire life." "Changed mine, too. I was so lonely, Beatrice. I had convinced myself that was just how life would be from then on. And then you showed up and reminded me that there was still hope, still possibility. We both needed saving, I think. You from your isolation, me from Pike. We saved each other." Marcus kissed the top of her head. Best storm I ever lived through." The third child was another boy, born in spring with a shock of dark hair and a loud voice. They named him James, and he completed their family in a way that felt perfect. 3 children, a thriving ranch, a strong marriage built on respect and love, and the shared memory of a storm that had brought them together. As the children grew, Marcus taught them about the land, about caring for animals and respecting nature. Beatrice taught them to read and write and think critically. Together they raised children who were confident and kind, who understood the value of hard work and the importance of standing up for what was right. Thomas, the eldest, showed an early aptitude for ranching. By the time he was 10, he could ride as well as any adult and had an uncanny ability to spot a sick cow before anyone else. Sarah was quieter, more bookish, happiest when curled up with a novel or helping her mother at the school. James was the adventurous one, always getting into scrapes and returning home muddy and grinning. The valley continued to grow. The Hendersons' ranch flourished. The Martinez family returned and started a successful horse breeding operation. The Weavers opened a general store that became the social hub of the community. And through it all, Marcus and Beatrice remained at the heart of the valley's life, respected and loved by their neighbors. One autumn evening, when Marcus was 42 and Beatrice was 39, they received an unexpected visitor. Marshal Cordell, now retired and silver-haired, rode up to the cabin with a smile on his weathered face. "Marshal," Marcus greeted him warmly, "what brings you all the way out here?" "Just wanted to see how you folks were doing," Cordell said, dismounting, "and to tell you something." Over dinner, with the children clustered around listening raptly, Cordell told them that Pike had died in prison. "Pneumonia," he said. "Not a pleasant death, but probably better than he deserved." "Did he ever show remorse?" Beatrice asked. "Not a bit. Maintained to the end that he was just conducting business." Cordell shook his head. "But he paid for his crimes, and that is what matters. This valley is better off without him, and you two made that possible." After the children went to bed, the 3 adults sat on the porch, drinking coffee and reminiscing. "You have built something special here," Cordell observed. "Not just the ranch, but this whole community. You should be proud." "We are," Marcus said, taking Beatrice's hand. "We are." After Cordell left the next morning, Marcus walked the property, taking stock of all they had built. The cabin had been expanded twice and now had 4 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and even a small parlor. The barn was solid and spacious, housing 20 horses and equipment for the ranch. The cattle herd numbered over 200 head. Fences marked neat boundaries, and the garden was a riot of color and produce. But more than the physical structures, Marcus was proud of what they had built together. A family, a marriage, a life that had meaning and purpose. He thought about the man he had been 10 years ago, alone in a small cabin, convinced his best days were behind him. If he could go back and tell that man what was coming, would he have believed it? Probably not. But that was the beauty of life, was it not? The unexpected turns, the moments that changed everything. One storm, one knock on the door, and everything had shifted. That evening he found Beatrice in the garden, harvesting the last of the tomatoes before the first frost. Sarah was helping her, chattering about a book she had read. Marcus watched them for a moment, his heart full. "Papa," Sarah called when she spotted him. "Come help us." Marcus joined them, kneeling in the dirt beside his daughter. As they worked, Beatrice caught his eye and smiled, that same smile that had captivated him a decade ago. He smiled back, thinking how lucky he was, how blessed. The years continued to pass, marked by small moments and big milestones. Thomas turned 16 and started courting a girl from the Henderson family, a sweet young woman named Emma. Sarah graduated from her mother's school at the top of her class and announced her intention to become a teacher herself. James, always the wild one, broke his arm falling out of a tree and was back climbing trees within a month of the cast coming off. Marcus and Beatrice grew older together, their hair graying, their faces lined, but their love as strong as ever. They still sat on the porch at sunset, still talked about everything and nothing, still found comfort and joy in each other's presence. When Thomas was 20, he married Emma in the same church where Marcus and Beatrice had been married. The valley turned out for the celebration, and Marcus gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. "To my son," he said, raising his glass, "may you be as lucky in love as I have been. May you find someone who makes you better, who stands beside you through storms and sunshine alike. And may you always remember that the best things in life are often the ones you never saw coming." The newlyweds moved into a house on the other side of the ranch, and Marcus began the process of teaching Thomas everything about running the operation. It was bittersweet, watching his son grow into manhood, but Marcus was proud of the man Thomas was becoming. Sarah left for a teaching position in a growing town 2 valleys over. It was the first time any of their children had left home for an extended period, and Beatrice cried when the wagon pulled away. But her tears were mixed with pride. Sarah was following her own path, just as they had raised her to do. James, at 15, showed no signs of settling down. He talked constantly about seeing the world, about adventures in far-off places. Marcus suspected he would not stay in the valley forever, and while that thought saddened him, he understood it. The world was changing, expanding, and young men like James wanted to be part of that expansion. One winter evening, with just the 3 of them at home, Beatrice said, "Do you ever miss the solitude, the quiet life you had before I showed up?" Marcus looked at her, this woman who had changed his life so completely. "Not for a second. Not even for a heartbeat." "Not even when James is driving you crazy with his schemes," Marcus laughed. "Not even then. You gave me back my life, Beatrice. You and the children, this whole messy, chaotic, beautiful life. I would not trade it for anything." She leaned over and kissed him. "Good answer." Spring brought news that Sarah was engaged to a merchant's son in the town where she taught. The wedding was planned for summer, and the whole family would travel to attend. Marcus found himself both excited and melancholy. His little girl, getting married. Time moved so quickly. The wedding was beautiful, held in a garden with mountains rising in the background. Sarah looked radiant, and her new husband, a kind young man named Peter, clearly adored her. During the reception, Marcus danced with his daughter, holding her close. "Thank you, Papa," Sarah said, "for everything. For teaching me to be strong, for supporting my dreams." "You made it easy," Marcus said. "You have always known your own mind, even as a little girl. I am so proud of you, Sarah. I learned from the best. You and Mama, the way you built a life together, the way you face everything as a team. That is what I want with Peter. Then you will have it. You are smart and brave, just like your mother." After the wedding, the family returned to the valley. Life continued its steady rhythm: cattle drives, planting and harvesting, births and deaths, and everything in between. Thomas and Emma had their first child, a boy they named Marcus after his grandfather. Holding his grandson for the first time, Marcus felt the circle complete. From loneliness to family, from isolation to legacy. Beatrice retired from teaching when she was 55, finally admitting that keeping up with energetic children was becoming too taxing. But she stayed involved with the school, serving on the board and mentoring younger teachers. The valley had grown enough to support 2 schools now, and she was proud of the role she had played in that growth. James, true to his wandering nature, left home at 18. He promised to write, and he did, sending letters from San Francisco, from Seattle, from places Marcus had never been. The letters were full of adventure and excitement, and Marcus read them aloud to Beatrice, both of them amazed at the changes sweeping across the country. But James always came home for Christmas. No matter where he was or what he was doing, he made his way back to the valley for the holiday. Those gatherings with all the children and grandchildren together were precious to Marcus. They reminded him of how far he had come, how much he had to be grateful for. On his 50th birthday, Marcus woke to find Beatrice watching him. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Just thinking," she said. 15 years ago, I knocked on your door in a storm. You were the loneliest man in the valley. And you saved me. We saved each other." She traced a finger along his jaw. "And look at us now. A ranch, children, grandchildren, a whole life neither of us expected." "The best life," Marcus agreed. He pulled her close. "I love you, Beatrice Sullivan. I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, Marcus Sullivan. Every stubborn, wonderful part of you." They stayed in bed a while longer, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in the life they had built. Later, there would be a party, with neighbors and family descending on the ranch to celebrate. But for now, it was just the two of them. Two people who had found each other in a storm and decided to weather life together. The party that afternoon was everything Marcus could have hoped for. The ranch was full of people. Thomas and Emma with their 3 children now, Sarah and Peter visiting with their baby daughter, James who had surprised everyone by coming home early. Neighbors Marcus and Beatrice had known for decades, people whose lives had intertwined with theirs over the years. Even Marshall Cordell, now quite elderly, had made the trip from Cheyenne. As the sun set and the party wound down, Marcus found himself on the porch, watching the familiar play of light across the valley. Beatrice joined him, as she always did, and they stood together in comfortable silence. "Happy birthday," she said softly. "Best one yet," Marcus replied. "You say that every year. And every year it is true. As long as you are beside me, they keep getting better." Beatrice leaned against him. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night? After you ran off Pike's men and I asked why you helped me," Marcus thought back. "I said some things were worth the risk. And they were, we were." She turned to face him. "I have never regretted knocking on your door, Marcus, not for 1 second. Good. Because I have never regretted opening it." They watched the last light fade from the sky, two people who had found each other when they both needed saving. The cabin behind them was full of family and laughter. The land around them was prosperous and peaceful. And between them was a love that had weathered storms and seasons and years, growing stronger with each passing day. Marcus Sullivan was no longer the loneliest man in the valley. He was a husband, a father, a grandfather, a respected member of his community. But more than any of that, he was loved, and he loved in return, and that made all the difference. Years continued to unfold like the pages of a well-worn book. Thomas took over full management of the ranch when Marcus was 60, though Marcus still helped with the daily work. He could not imagine a life that did not include riding out to check the herd or mending fences alongside his son and grandsons. Sarah and Peter had 4 children eventually, and she continued teaching, becoming one of the most respected educators in the territory. Her oldest daughter showed signs of following in her footsteps, already organizing elaborate lessons for her younger siblings. James finally settled down at 30, marrying an adventurous woman named Catherine, who he had met in Denver. They moved back to the valley and built a house on a piece of land Marcus and Beatrice gifted them. James started a freighting business, using his knowledge of the wider world to establish trade routes that benefited the entire valley. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management. He was a natural rancher, with his father's work ethic and his mother's sharp mind for numbers. The Sullivan Ranch became known throughout Wyoming for its quality cattle and its fair dealing. Marcus and Beatrice grew old together, their steps slower but their connection as deep as ever. They spent their days watching grandchildren play, tending the garden, and sitting on the porch they had sat on for so many years. The cabin that had once housed just Marcus now echoed with multiple generations, especially during holidays when everyone came home. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire valley threw them a party. It was held at the school Beatrice had helped build, now expanded to include multiple rooms and serving over 60 students. People came from all over, some traveling for days, to honor the couple who had helped transform the valley from a place of fear under Pike's rule to a thriving community. The current marshal of Cheyenne, a young man named Davidson who had trained under Cordell, read a proclamation from the territorial governor, thanking Marcus and Beatrice for their service and courage. There were speeches and toasts, and more than a few tears. When Marcus stood to speak, he looked out at the crowd and marveled at how much had changed. 25 years ago, he said, his voice still strong at 63, I was alone. I had convinced myself that was my fate, that I would live and die in that cabin with no one to mourn my passing. And then a storm came, and this remarkable woman knocked on my door, and everything changed. He looked at Beatrice, sitting beside him. She gave me back my life. She gave me love and family and purpose. She gave me a reason to face each day with hope instead of resignation. This valley, this community, all of you, you are part of that gift. So tonight, I am not just celebrating 25 years of marriage. I am celebrating the moment I opened my door and decided that loneliness was not a virtue but a prison I could escape from. The applause was deafening. Beatrice stood and kissed him, and Marcus held her close, grateful beyond words for every moment they had shared. As they entered their late 60s, Marcus and Beatrice slowed down considerably. The ranch was fully in Thomas's hands now, though Marcus still advised when asked. Beatrice spent her days with her grandchildren, teaching them to read and filling their heads with stories and ideas. They still sat on the porch every evening, weather permitting. Sometimes the grandchildren joined them, and Marcus would tell stories of the old days, of the war and of Thomas his brother, of the night a brave young woman stole a ledger and changed the valley forever. Tell us about when Grandma knocked on the door. The youngest grandchildren would beg, even though they had heard the story dozens of times, and Marcus would tell it again, watching Beatrice's eyes sparkle with remembered fear and triumph. The story had become legend in the valley, a tale of courage and love that parents told their children to inspire them. On a warm summer evening, when Marcus was 72 and Beatrice was 69, they sat on the porch watching the sun set. The valley was golden in the late light, peaceful and beautiful. 3 of their great-grandchildren were playing in the yard, their laughter carried on the breeze. "We did good, didn't we?" Beatrice said softly. "We did very good." Marcus took her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers as they had countless times over the years. "Thank you, Beatrice, for knocking on my door, for staying, for loving me even when I was too broken to believe I deserved it. You always deserved it. You just needed to remember how." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for opening the door, for protecting me, for building this life with me. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. So would I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the stars emerge. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of dinner being prepared, Thomas's voice calling to one of his sons, Emma laughing at something. The sounds of family, of life continuing. "I love you," Marcus said. "I love you too," Beatrice replied. They stayed on the porch until full dark, holding hands, connected by a bond that had been forged in a storm and strengthened by every year, every challenge, every joy they had shared. The loneliest man in the valley had found his purpose, his peace, and his love. And that love had created ripples that spread far beyond their small cabin, touching everyone in the valley and shaping the future in ways neither of them could have imagined that stormy night so long ago. The years rolled on, gentler now. Marcus and Beatrice celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by 3 children, 11 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. The ranch had expanded beyond anything Marcus had imagined, sprawling across the valley. The Sullivan name was synonymous with integrity and quality throughout Wyoming. When Marcus was 75, he woke one morning to find his body finally protesting the years of hard work. His joints ached more than usual, and getting out of bed required more effort than he cared to admit. Beatrice noticed, of course. She always noticed. "Time to let the young ones do the heavy lifting," she said gently. Marcus wanted to protest, but he knew she was right. He spent that day teaching his oldest grandson, young Marcus, the finer points of managing the ranch accounts. The boy, now 23, listened intently, asking smart questions that reminded Marcus of Beatrice. "You will do fine," Marcus told him. "Better than fine, you have a good head on your shoulders. I learned from the best, grandfather." As autumn approached, Marcus found himself thinking more about the past, about the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the war, about his brother Thomas, about the lonely years in the cabin before Beatrice arrived. But mostly he thought about how lucky he had been, how one moment of opening a door had changed everything. Beatrice, sensing his reflective mood, would sit with him and they would reminisce. They talked about the night they met, about the dangerous journey to Cheyenne, about the early years of building the ranch and raising children. They laughed over memories of James's childhood mischief and cried remembering Sarah's wedding. Every memory was precious, polished smooth by the years. Winter came early that year, with heavy snows that blanketed the valley. Marcus spent most of his days by the fire, content to watch the world through the window. Beatrice would read to him, or they would play chess, or simply sit in silence, comfortable in each other's presence as they had always been on Christmas Day. The house was full to bursting. All 3 children had come home with their families. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled every corner with noise and laughter. Marcus sat in his favorite chair, Beatrice beside him, and watched the chaos with deep contentment. Young Thomas raised a toast to grandfather and grandmother. "Thank you for showing us what love looks like, what family means, and what it takes to build something that lasts. We are all here because of your courage and your love. We love you both." "Hear, hear," the room chorused, and Marcus felt tears on his cheeks. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Marcus and Beatrice sat by the dying fire. "Thank you for this life," Marcus said. "I could not have imagined anything better, nor could I." Beatrice squeezed his hand. "We were both so lost and we found each other. That is the miracle, is it not? That even in our darkest moments there is hope for light. You were my light. And you were mine." They stayed up late into the night, talking softly, remembering, planning for the grandchildren's futures, content in the knowledge that they had built something good and lasting. The lonely man in the cabin was a distant memory, replaced by a life full of love and meaning. Spring came, bringing new life to the valley. The cattle had thrived over winter, and the ranch was positioned for another successful year. Thomas reported everything to Marcus, who listened with interest, but without the burning need to be involved that had driven him for so many years. He was content to advise when asked and otherwise enjoy the fruits of the life he and Beatrice had built. On a warm day in May, Marcus felt particularly energetic. He insisted on riding out to check the herd, despite Beatrice's concerned protests. Thomas saddled his gentlest horse and rode alongside him, ready to help if needed. They rode to the high pasture, where the cattle grazed peacefully. Marcus sat his horse and looked out over the valley, seeing not just what was but what had been. He saw the valley as it was when he first arrived, wild, untamed, lonely. He saw it as it became under Pike's shadow, fearful, oppressed. And he saw it as it was now, thriving, peaceful, home to dozens of families and hundreds of dreams. "I am proud of what we built," Marcus said to his son. "Not just the ranch, but all of it, the community, the legacy. We all are, Father. You and Mother showed us the way." They rode back as the sun began to set, Marcus moving slowly but steadily. When they reached the cabin, Beatrice was waiting on the porch, relief evident on her face. "You worried me," she scolded, but her embrace was warm. "I am fine. Just wanted to see the land one more time from horseback." That night they sat on the porch as they had thousands of times before. The air was soft with spring, carrying the scent of new grass and wildflowers. Marcus held Beatrice's hand and felt at peace. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the door." "What door?" "The one you knocked on all those years ago. The one I almost did not answer because I was so determined to stay isolated." He turned to look at her. "What would have happened if I had not opened it, if I had sent you away?" Beatrice considered. "I suppose I would have died in the storm, or Pike's men would have caught me, and you would have stayed alone in your cabin, slowly turning into a ghost. That is what I was, you know, before you came, a ghost going through the motions of living without really living at all. And now I have lived a full life. I have loved and been loved. I have raised children and seen grandchildren grow. I have been part of a community, made a difference, left something behind that will last." He kissed her hand. "All because I opened the door." "All because you had the courage to let someone in," Beatrice corrected. "That was the bravest thing you ever did, Marcus Sullivan. Not standing up to Pike's men, not any of it. The bravest thing was letting yourself be vulnerable enough to love again." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. The sounds of family drifted from inside the cabin, where their grandchildren were putting their own children to bed. The cycle of life continuing, the legacy they had built together. "I love you, Beatrice Johnson Sullivan," Marcus said. "Every day since you knocked on my door, I have loved you more. And I love you, you stubborn, wonderful man. Thank you for building this life with me." They stayed on the porch late into the night, holding hands under the stars. Two people who had found each other in a storm and created something beautiful from the ruins of their lonely lives. The valley slept peacefully around them, a testament to what courage and love could build, a home not just for them but for generations to come. Marcus Sullivan, once the loneliest man in the valley, had lived to see his life overflow with love and family. And as he sat there with his wife's hand in his, watching the stars wheel overhead, he knew with absolute certainty that opening his door that stormy night had been the best decision of his life. Everything good, everything meaningful, everything that mattered had flowed from that one moment of choosing connection over isolation. The legacy would continue long after they were gone. The ranch, the family, the values they had instilled. But the heart of it all, the center from which everything else had grown, was love. Simple, powerful, transformative love. And that was the greatest gift they could leave behind.